They connect to present-day politic, though not explicitly political articles. They're research articles, but they are research related to a personality type, and perhaps some correlations that aren't causal. But all the same, that's entertainment. Thank you for the lurk and listen. So we've got one article on apocalyptic views are surprisingly common among Americans and predict responses to existential hazards. No reference to John Nelson Darby in this article, surprisingly. Who gets a lot of, he's not the founder, but he gets a lot of credit for positing notions of like eschatology, end times interpretations, the book of Revelations in the Bible that wasn't really about like predicting the end times, but it gets interpreted as such for beyond entertainment purposes, and stokes a lot of irrational fear in so many people, almost as if they enjoy it. Another article on hypocrisy and intolerance driving religious doubt among college students, kind of myself among that at one time, even while going to a religious university. Third article on a psychological need for certainty as associated with radical right-wing voting, which I'm already at a glance interpreting as those who kind of more rigidly operate in what's considered, and this is a it's considered a cognitive distortion, black and white thinking. That's one of 100 different types of cognitive distortions that if you recognize, you might be able to catch yourself laboring under misinformation or about to share some, or potentially misreading a situation, but sometimes called dichotomous thinking, sometimes called black and white thinking. Those who are more aligned with that type of thinking and not recognizing when they may be operating under a cognitive distortion or several, may be eased by the certainty of, or at least what's projected from a certain source that their party affiliation may offer them. So the article gets into a little more of that. Do I have this formatted the way we want it? It kind of fits. I can make it even bigger. Help it grow. Help it grow. Like that. Of course, this formatting only works for one website. Thank you, Tell.
Been hitting that premium good for 11 months.
Thank you for hitting that premium good. It's almost been a year. Hot damn. Welcome in. Wait, did the music stop or is it just really quiet? Oh. It's just a little on the quiet side. So we all check our GoldenEye watches. And then throw ass to the GoldenEye song, GoldenEye menu music. Yeah. Radio Geek, welcome in. It was a pleasure to catch one of your streams recently too. Chill vibes over there. Love for y'all to check out a Radio Geek stream. And he was playing one of my favorites that I remember, was one of the last games I remember playing before I finished university. Batman Arkham City. Alright, first article on deck. Apocalyptic views are surprisingly common among Americans that predict responses to existential hazards. It doesn't mean that it's popular with the majority of amount of Americans, it's just there's a, to use emotionally appealing rhetoric, an alarming number of persons who are somehow soothed by attaching themselves to what may be considered clinically more paranoid type thoughts and ideologies. It finished it almost in entirety last night. Good job. This ties into, if anybody's familiar with the $4 word for the evening, eschatology. Study the end times. Study the end times. We know they're coming. You got to be prepared to save your soul. As we evangelically proselytize to you, sell your soul. Don't sell your soul. Sell your money to us. to save your soul. And then you won't get left behind. Is the idea you won't get left behind. Don't be left behind with the rest of the sinners. Give all your money, material possessions to the church. And then drink the Kool-Aid. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. That's the thing. The nature of eschatology, study of the end times, and a gross misinterpretation of the book of Revelations has time and time again failed to produce claims of a return of a savior, Gnostic, Christ-like figure. Innumerable times, right? I mean countless, literal countless times. Before there were social media influencers, there were evangelical proselytizers who were trying to capitalize on the popular notion of studying the, again, gross misinterpretation of the book of Revelation, the end times. Because if it's nothing if not entertaining and interesting, right? Doesn't matter if it's not true, but then predict a day and fill in the blank horrific events that align with what was forecasted, quote unquote, and you've got yourself a recipe for a prediction. You got yourself a recipe for a prediction, and those who are aligned with perhaps some paranoid personality types that may get excited by that and wanting to hear more. It's a subject we're familiar with. I think a lot of us, I know you especially, but a lot of us, of course, especially me in the South, in the Bible Belt, had a wide subjective exposure to various sects of Christian, well, there's various sects of Christianity. So from Southern Baptist to Church of Christ to non-denominational to Presbyterian and Episcopalian and Catholicism. Need I go on? I think I had a pretty decent cross-section exposure to at least that slice of life. All of them have their own brand of eschatology. All of them preach on the end times. Well, I say I didn't really run into that with Catholicism so much, but I'm not an expert in Catholicism whatsoever. In fact, I'd say that's where my cliff's edge of knowledge I would run into that pretty quickly. I don't know their interpretations and what they would popularize from the book of Revelations, but most of the other Southern Baptist type Church of Christ, that sort of thing, go big in on interpretations of Revelations, that sort of thing, get people excited about notions of the apocalypse. And anytime there's global conflict, war, which, thanks to the United States involvement throughout our lifetime and well before, the U.S. has been involved in a global conflict for, fact check me on this, a couple hundred years now. We've almost always been involved in some conflict outside of managing our own motherfucking business. Because people we appoint to power seem to deem it their will to disrupt any, say, notion of an egalitarian society being developed and where socialism may be developed. They're going to intervene and strategically psyop their way to a conflict and so on and so forth. And then we arrive to situations like today where us invading and more or less creating a cloud of crimes against humanity in Iran are rationalized by someone like Pete Hegseth and telling his troops, we're kind of going in on vibes. And by vibes, they mean something eschatology related. We're trying to trigger the apocalypse. This is an interpretation of what he shared, but holy war was mentioned. How do we get to these things? Many people believe the world will end soon, and these apocalyptic views shape how they react to real global threats like climate change and artificial intelligence. A new study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology reveals that these narratives dictate whether individuals would want to prevent or ignore looming global crises. By mapping the specific features of these doomsday beliefs, researchers can predict public responses to the major hazards of our time. People from varying backgrounds hold ideas about the apocalypse. Some individuals expect a religious prophecy to unfold. I tried to look up a number on this before we started stream so I could have just something beyond anecdotally saying, yeah, they've been disproven hundreds of times. But if you look, they've been presented and disproven innumerable times, hundreds upon hundreds of times. But then also brought into a realm of additional fiction for cash grabs in like the Left Behind series, right? Incredibly popular. Because it even catches those kind of like tethering on the vine of secularism that just catches them with that like, well, what if? What if I'm one of those like deathbed repentant followers here? What if? You know, even grabbing the attention of those types. Risk perception is the psychological study of how people judge the severity of a hazard. Past research has examined how personal experiences of community standards influence these judgments, yet experts have rarely examined how deeply held convictions about the ultimate fate of humanity affect reactions to immediate crises. Historically, apocalyptic ideas were primarily religious, focusing on supernatural battles between good and evil. Today, these narratives also appear in secular contexts, driven by anxieties over nuclear weapons, ecological collapse, and advanced theology. And that's kind of what I was more interested in because, separate from eschatology, of course, we have our own rightful notions of, okay, is it valid to feel hopeless about this? Is my anxiety or my feelings about this cacophony, this onslaught, this rapid succession of moral injuries being something that occurs to all of us when the people we vote in power that we trust to make the right decision repeatedly don't. And then that's reflected on us, or the guilt that we feel about any penny of our taxes going to, say, bomb a children's school, you know? Anything along those lines that we might carry some very valid guilt about that we'd want to disconnect ourselves from and maintain some radical hope so that we can create some actionable change, which we're all working on. Even among progressive beliefs, groups tend towards caring less about looming crises. Even those among more progressive beliefs, groups tend towards caring less about looming crises. The 24-hour news cycle is at least partially responsible. Oh, totally. Well, I mean, that's a separate but totally relevant conversation about entertainment versus actual news, op-ed type news versus...
As Collins
Hello,
has
Collins.
been hitting that premium good for 39 months.
But opinion-based news, curated solely for entertainment, almost solely for entertainment.
Guilty as charged.
That's him. Also, congrats on mastering the new record. Coming soon to eardrums near us soon, I hope. Bring it on, lay it on us. Let's take a sound bath together, all of us. But yeah, Radio Geek, that's a very relevant comment to media presentation overall, and then, the kind of media conglomerate that owns every single local agency regurgitating very familiar rhetoric. Manufacturing consent comes to mind with a lot of that, appealing to the gullible, persuasion of the gullible, propaganda-driven news, but a lot of that, I know Fox News takes a bad rap, don't they? But they are largely responsible for popularizing more entertainment and opinion-driven news cycle than the humdrum, less opinion-oriented, more objective, fact-based reporting like you'd find in maybe Reuters or AP, Al Jazeera, things that take more cognitive labor to review than entertainment-presented news that does a few things. It usually leads with heavy emotional appeal. It uses what we'll talk about in a minute, very black and white, very rigid black and white thinking, dichotomous thinking rather. And they don't really close the loop on a lot of ideas. They don't appreciate nuance, right? Might stream my listening party? Yes, please. Yes, please. There's some other patterns to paying attention to, like, is the news that we're consuming, I say we, but media hygiene, media literacy type of bona fides to keep in mind for the media that we're consuming. It sounds like you're already on board with that, but even CNN is guilty of the same thing. Well, of course, they're owned by the same company now, but say a decade ago, they were fundamentally doing the same thing as far as how news was presented. At one time, interestingly enough, Fox News, when they would market themselves as fair and balanced, interestingly enough, their daytime programming, we're saying like late 90s, very early 2000s, like Iraq War, early 2000s, their daytime programming before they got into like the Tucker Carlson era type shit, their daytime programming was actually associated statistically with more fact-based news, but then when they got into the evening hours of broadcasting and trying to catch the primetime viewing, then of course they shifted their market appeal to maintain that attraction and less more of a focus on entertainment and opinion and heavy emotional rhetoric over more fact-based reporting. Historically, apocalyptic ideals were associated with primarily religious focusing on supernatural beliefs between good and evil. Today, these narratives appeal in secular contexts driven by anxieties over nuclear weapons, ecological collapse, and advanced technology. I already read this. The atomic science community, and has even maintained a doomsday clock, or the atomic science community has even maintained a doomsday clock closer to midnight than ever since the mid-20th century to symbolize the proximity of global destruction. Matthew Billett led the new research as a doctoral candidate in psychology at the University of British Columbia. He is now a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Columbia, Irvine. Billett and his colleagues, Billett et al., wanted to understand the psychological structure of these apocalyptic narratives. They noticed that previous studies usually treated doomsday beliefs as a single concept, mostly focusing on whether people thought the end was near. Billett's team suspected that these views were more varied and contained multiple psychological dimensions. They hypothesized that the specific dates of a person's apocalyptic narrative would predict their willingness to tackle global problems. A unidimensional approach might assume that anyone who thinks the world is ending will simply give up on the future. The why bother types. The researchers argued that this view is incomplete, noting that historical doomsday movements have sometimes sparked political revolutions and other times encouraged passive waiting. And there are examples of political movements sparking uprising and tide changes in political ideologies and voter outcomes, especially like the Black Lives Movement, heavily associated with sparking a change in the 2020 elections. Understanding this dynamic is highly relevant today. Populations must coordinate across cultural divides to address shared problems like global pandemics or nuclear conflict. The researchers sought to uncover why different communities react with either urgency or indifference to the exact same global risks. I see a third of them are burnt the fuck out. Well, maybe. The research team began by conducting 6 pilot studies involving university students and general public in Canada and the United States. The initial tests allowed the researchers to develop and validate a psychological questionnaire. They called this tool the End of the World Belief Scale. I'd fill it out. Scale measures 5 distinct facets of how people view the apocalypse. I'll try to find that actually. Try to find that so we can score it. Scale measures 5 distinct facets of how people view the apocalypse. The first facet is perceived closeness. Ain't that the psychology of any risk? Like, you get a tornado warning in your area, but then it misses and hits another neighborhood. Oh, we were lucky. What is luck but the proximity of your own existential threat measured? The first facet is perceived closeness, which asks how soon the end will arrive. The second is anthropogenic causality, which asks whether human actions will bring about the destruction. Who's got their finger on the button? The third facet is theogenic causality, measuring whether people believe a divine or supernatural force is responsible. The fourth is personal control, which gauges how much influence an individual feels they have over the end times. And a sense of control over anything. A sense of autonomy and self-connectedness is what usually makes a difference in escaping that overwhelming helplessness we feel sometimes. The final facet is emotional balance, which captures whether a person believes the end of the world will ultimately be a good or a bad thing. Let it all restart. Wash it all away. After finalizing the scale, the researchers launched a large survey of over 1,400 adults in the United States. The main study was pre-registered, meaning the scientists publicly documented their hypotheses and analysis plan before collecting the data. They recruited a sample with diverse religious affiliations to capture a wide range of perspectives. I'm a little heavy tongue tonight on you. Some nights I do get heavy-tongued on you, I apologize. The group included Catholics, mainline Protestants, evangelical Protestants, Jewish people, Muslims, non-religious individuals. The participants answered the end-of-the-world belief scale that outlined their personal views. Then, they read about one of 5 global risk categories defined by the World Economic Forum. These categories included economic dangers like supply chain collapses, as well as environmental threats like natural disasters. They also covered geopolitical risks like nuclear war, societal hazards, and hazards like pandemics, technological issues, like unregulated artificial intelligence. So this is relatively new, and of course our concerns about like a new more relevant one would be the pangs of like data centers. That if you live anywhere near, and you might, a prospective site for like a data center, you have within your means of petitioning your city council to kibosh that shit. We've almost done so successfully recently. Like in my own county, there's a suburb of Fort Worth called Benbrook, where another OpenAI, or who is it? The Chat GPT fucks. They were gonna put a data center in that little slice of Fort Worth. It's not completely gone, but it is at least delayed with more open public conversation to hopefully prevent that from happening. But that is an example of like a more proximate threat that affects all of us because of the hemorrhaging of resources that goes into any one of those data centers, much less the pollutants that are emitted from those, and how that just has a multitudinal impact on resource depletion and then all-cause mortality. Basically for those that live within like 20 miles or more of the data centers. Yeah, Godzilla, when you're done with the financial district, make the people happy. Squish the data centers too. So I heard Heather come on in there. Hello, Heather. Bonjour. Welcome in. Interestingly enough, what's the book's title? Is it Ruskov? It'll come to me probably when it's not important, or maybe in a minute, but oh God, isn't it Ruskov? That's gonna bother me. I'll look it up now. Is it Douglas Ruskov? Rushkov. What was one of his books? Team Human. There's the book I'm trying to think of. Ruskov, Douglas Rushkoff, has a really good book called Team Human. I read it a few years ago, and interestingly enough, when he was promoting the book, he was saying that part of what inspired him to write about like the cautionary tales of our over-reliance on AI, and having like a code of ethics, the importance of like a code of ethics on this. One of his cautionary tales for like motivating him to publish this book and more, and be an advocate for largely like things you would find on like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, right? Like consumer protections, rights to repair, that kind of thing. He was inspired by all of this by going to public engagements and like just talks for usually like the tech bro kind of community. He'd be like a paid public speaker, that kind of thing. And he realized that there was a common denominator between like most of them. In that in-group in particular, he thought it was interesting that most of them were preparing for what they called the event. And their event was like a Fallout type, let's make a shelter city, let's prepare for global disaster, while also not recognizing that much of the resources that they're demanding they consume to fuel their interests and much less overflow their already fat as fuck wallets were directly responsible for contributing to that very notion of needing fall. It's almost like the plot of Fallout fully realized at this point, right? But it was the thing that inspired him to even talk about that publicly was going to events like that where noticing there was a pattern between all of the tech bros, and this is less than 10 years ago, who were all like almost excited about the notions of what they were calling the event, and then of course that being global cataclysm, which they were planning to survive. Planning to survive, of course, requires living in a higher SES bracket than most of us. Adam, welcome in. Good to have you. Hi. All right, so we've got the questionnaire here. Participants reported their perception of the assigned risk severity and their tolerance for its negative impacts. They also indicated their willingness to support extreme actions to address the threat. We're going looting! Get in the bus, everybody! We also stole this bus. The extreme actions included devoting a massive portion of the national budget to the problem of instituting martial law. The researchers found that apocalyptic expectations are incredibly common in the United States. Nearly 1 in 3 participants, I knew it wasn't more than half, nearly 1 in 3 participants believed the world would end within their own lifetime. Most participants, regardless of their religious background, agreed that humans would play a role in the fate of our species. At least we can agree upon that. However, the specific flavor of these beliefs varied widely among different religious groups. Evangelical Protestants and Muslims scored highly on the belief that divine force will cause the end. They also tended to view the apocalypse with a more positive emotional balance, seeing it as a necessary step towards a better state. Non-religious participants scored very low on the theogenic causality and emotional valence. They did not expect a divine entity to intervene, and they did not view the end of the world positively. They also felt the end was less imminent than the religious groups did. Because like myself, they've seen those who have proselytized and evangelized the end, thanks to the eschatology type schools of thought, be wrong innumerable times. Belief in anthropogenic causality also predicted higher risk perception. When individuals believed human actions would cause the end, they took modern global threats very seriously. Ain't that funny when you have a group of individuals who realize there's not a supernatural intervention likely to flip the switch. They suddenly realize there's a deeper connectedness to it all. Ain't that funny? On the other hand, theogenic causality predicted lower support for extreme preventative actions. Why would we do something when our God is a vending machine? Someone who believes humans are causing the apocalypse through climate change will respond very differently to the emotional policy than someone who believes that the end times are controlled by divine prophecy. Curiously, individuals who viewed the end of the world positively showed a high tolerance for risk. They also showed greater support for extreme actions to address global threats. The researchers admitted a particular result is puzzling, as one might assume a positive view of the apocalypse would lead to total inaction. To ensure the results were robust, the scientists controlled for other psychological traits like neuroticism, general political conservatism. They even checked if general conspiratorial thinking or religious fundamentalism could explain the patterns. The specific facets of apocalyptic belief continue to predict the responses independently of these other factors. The study relies on observational survey data. This means that the researchers cannot prove the apocalyptic views directly cause specific behaviors. As always, correlation isn't causal. The researchers also noted that the sample was limited to the United States and Canada. And there's no mention of like news hours consumed, tests for media literacy biases, implicit biases, cultural biases. So they're not going that nuanced with this data. For instance, researchers could examine societies that view time as cyclical rather than linear. They could also look at cultures. Oh wait, they're talking about strengths and weaknesses in this study. Fuller understanding of human psychology requires looking beyond these populations. Future studies should explore a wider array of global cultures and religious traditions. Exactly. Speak to what biases may inform belief systems, worldviews, that kind of thing. For instance, researchers could examine societies that view time as cyclical rather than linear. Hi, Buddhists. They could also look at cultures with widespread beliefs in reincarnation, which might alter how people conceptualize the end of days. In a roundabout way, I do believe in reincarnation. I just won't return as a robust superorganism. Additional research may also investigate why apocalyptic narratives spread so easily across different societies. Scientists could explore the specific psychological traits that make these ideas so appealing to the human mind. I mean, part of that's understandable. We've talked about it before. We just enjoy fiction. We enjoy projecting ourselves into stories and hypotheticals, and they help us, in many cases, mitigate anxieties about uncertainty. Whereas uncertainty is usually the fuel for anxiety. So being able to enjoy a work of fiction, even relatable fiction, though I suppose that the true believers of all things religious don't necessarily consider it fiction, but all the same, projecting themselves into a story of relatability, in a way, has some very human, if not mental health benefits. This ties directly into the next two articles. Incidentally, this one's on hypocrisy and intolerance driving religious doubt amongst college students. I've been there, man. I've been there. College students often question their faith because of the intolerant or hypocritical behaviors of religious groups. While these doubts can increase emotional distress, they also frequently foster intellectual humility, an open-minded search for meaning. Humility is one of those things that is so often associated with emotional intelligence and just how intelligence is rated overall. But even then, intelligence is kind of a gross word to throw around in so many cases because it's so often used to separate, divide, especially in class systems. I guess the point is, for those who would say otherwise, it's intellectual humility is associated with systems that would be more likely associated with empathy and the ability to understand others' needs, which is a very good thing, and requires intelligence and a very active prefrontal cortex. In the United States, religious affiliation has steadily declined over the last few decades. And again, given the current circumstances with people like Pete Hegseth and sponsors of persons interested in, say, like Trump's prayer dinner and that sort of those sort of events, make it very difficult to speak positively of any religion because they are operating exactly how religion was fundamentally designed to serve. They're operating in a sense of control. Conversely, there are persons like James Tallarico who make that much more palatable and would arguably represent what I was taught growing up as a more closely aligned follower of, like, say, Christ's teachings. For whatever comfort that's worth for our religious friends in chat, I think people like Tallarico make a good case for returning to represent what that looks like and then not letting those who are currently run our government do so under the guise of the worst sort of machinations and using unknown supernatural entities to justify their decisions to harm others and ostracize them. Well, just harm. That covers enough, doesn't it? In the United States, religious affiliation has steadily declined over the past few decades. Reading that again, a growing number of young adults identify as non-religious, often leaving the traditions in which they were raised. Sociologists and psychologists sometimes refer to this demographic of formerly religious individuals as the duns. We are done. We are so done. Julie J. Exline, a researcher at the University of Virginia, led a team to investigate how questioning faith affects mental health and personal growth. Exline and her colleagues focused specifically on college students, as the transition to adulthood is typically a time of intense identity exploration during this developmental window. During this developmental window, young adults often counter new ideas that challenge their childhood worldviews. To understand this process, psychologists look at how people build their global meaning systems. Meaning-making system is essentially the framework a person uses to make sense of the world and their place in it. Meaning-making systems. Deeply held religious beliefs often form the core of this orienting framework. So many people I care about are experiencing religious psychosis, and rediscovering Christ made me wonder if I'm missing something. But I realize it's not me who's missing something, it's them. They're looking for the answers when there's no clear answer. And that ties directly into kind of what the previous article was getting at is... Or no, not previous article. The next article is going to get into, actually. It gets into those who kind of labor under... because they weren't really taught how to address like discomfort of social stress or managing the anxieties of the unknowable. They're taught from, and this has to do with like power differentials and social hierarchies and that sort of thing. But if we're operating under a class system where the social hierarchy and the powerful class are often wealthy and religious, then there's a lot of kind of cognitive bypassing that occurs with the younger minds, especially those who are going to naturally be a little more easily persuaded by those exercising their power differentials, whether they know it or not, and saying, like, here's the truth, here's the certainty, here's that thing to soothe the discomfort that you're feeling. We're offering that to you. And what greater certainty to soothe the discomfort of than, oh, you have some existential pangs that need quelling, we've got you. Without really questioning the secondary gains or benefits that those in the positions of authority exercising those power differentials stand to gain by cultivating, by being the fishes of men as they so often are, selling truth as they would so call it or deem it. But in my experience, and again, anecdotal, subjective, right? In my experience, it doesn't tend to foster like long-term certainty. For me and my neurotype, it was always, well, what then? What lies beyond? Who created the creator? Do we know that? If we're gonna go that route, you know? A perspective that not many, also hi Felonious, good to see you. A perspective that not many people get the chance to experience. Yeah, that's the other thing, is that I was, afforded the privilege of an education in comparative analysis, being able to compare different religions, and broaden my worldview that I think otherwise would probably have not happened had I had a more rigid, subservient type of cultural learning experience, and somehow I navigated that okay. But Heather, I'm sorry that other people that you care about are kind of getting pulled into that route. It's funny to hear that, and then couched in the other data that we know that those aligned with sacred belief systems are kind of on the decline, where secularism is steadily on the rise. More fundy varieties of Christianity offer answers to make people feel better about having uncertainty. That's usually it, yeah. So back to global meaning systems, at least as it's spoken to in the framework of this research. While people encounter information that contradicts their core beliefs, which is usually what results in like cognitive dissonance, of course, refusing to or refuting information that contradicts what you already believe, despite all of the data lining up to disprove what you may believe. That discomfort is cognitive dissonance. A meaning-making system is essentially the framework a person uses to make sense of the world and their place in it, which I would tie to a worldview. Deeply held religious beliefs often form the core. Okay, we've read that. When people encounter information that contradicts their core beliefs, they experience, this is why I scroll down so I don't reread, when people encounter information that contradicts their core beliefs, they experience psychological tension. To resolve this discomfort, which again is cognitive dissonance, individuals must engage in a process called accommodation. Accommodation involves putting in the mental effort, the cognitive labor, to revise existing belief structures so that new conflicting ideas can be integrated. So I would call this reconciliation, but it doesn't happen. In a lot of cases, it doesn't happen instantaneously. It happens gradually. If we're lucky and we're talking through some real shit with people that we care about, they're gonna accept what we're presenting to them. without being so rigid about what beliefs they want to uphold. But chances are, more often than not, it's going to take some work to ask them the questions like, well, how did you come to believe what you believe? Did you accept this belief by, say, someone exercising a power differential, like a newscaster, telling you to just accept this at face value? Was it someone in your religious network that has a hierarchical tier above you? Do they have something to gain by not losing your trust? And if they're speaking ill about, say, like the transgender community, how many transgender persons do you know that would be impacted by, say, a bathroom bill? And then start get their wheels turning of like, well, I don't know anybody. And well, I do know people who are impacted by these bills, and here's how. Get their wheels turning, get them try to work on those empathy networks. They'll maybe get to that point of reconciliation, accommodation, out of that very sticky cognitive dissonance. It is sticky because it's protective. It is activating. It is quite literally activating their fight or flight network to self-soothe, self-protect, to manage that discomfort of being faced with, facts that challenge their feelings or information that they didn't really get all of the details on. They didn't get all that they were given one perspective on, right? I say they in this case, just the rhetorical they of who we're having a conversation with. But Carly, hello, welcome in. Good to have you. General doubt might simply be an intellectual questioning of a doctrine, like wondering if a specific historical event actually occurred. Moon landing, real or fake? Doubt struggles, on the other hand, involve deep worry, confusion, or emotional pain regarding those uncertainties. For an individual whose entire life and circle revolve around a church, doubting God's existence could trigger more profound distress. Conversely, someone who is barely religious might have many doubts without experiencing any emotional turmoil. I find myself among that a lot. Doubts without the physical discomfort as much. To explore these dynamics, the researchers surveyed almost 4,000 undergraduate students. And again, why undergraduate students? Because they're at a pivotal moment in their lives, and it's kind of a milestone event. They're already undergoing the everyday stressors of presumably, more than 12 hours of, a full load of classes. These institutions included a private research university, a public state university, and a private Christian university. I attended all three. The participants answered extensive questionnaires about their religious background, current spiritual identity, and mental health. The researchers categorized the students into 6 distinct groups based on their level of religious engagement. These categories...
You got something to drink?
I have. Take care of me. Thank you, Nandu. I'll sit my brow, and it's been a minute. Thank you, and welcome in. The researchers categorized the students into 6 distinct groups based on their levels of religious engagement. These categories range from students who were never religious to those who had completely disengaged. I would say when I started college, at least junior college, just to give you a little slice of self-disclosure, early junior college, where I got most of my basics done before transferring to a private Christian university, I would have been a fair weather Christian. Didn't attend routine services, but would go if it were like a social event or a family gathering, like a Mother's Day service, Valentine's Day service, that sort of thing. Cut to me going to Abilene Christian University. Chapel was mandatory every day, and so I went a lot. That was like going to church every day, and including taking more theology-based courses like Life and Teachings of Jesus, New and Old Testament type shit. Coincidentally, my time at that particular university coincided with my outright disillusionment. Comparative religion also did a lot for me too, but just becoming more politically engaged around that point, courtesy of a very good friend of mine, broadened my worldview. I accommodated, to use the term in this, I reconciled a lot of belief systems that I was already questioning. And like I mentioned earlier, I grew up and I already attended just about every sect of known Christianity, at least in the South. And it was just somehow he's laboring under the idea of, okay, well, who has it right here if not the Episcopalians or the Southern Baptists or the Church of Christ, whoever else, or the non-denominationals, right? Those doing a little faith healing along those lines, which I also witnessed. Not at college, but in my youth. Things that just didn't stack up to me to where I never saw divine intervention succeed in easing someone's existential woes or quelling that uncertainty or just providing those long-term answers while still seeing plenty make some pretty significant leaps in logic, self-soothing by just reinforcing what they wanted to believe and being comforted by it, which was fine. It's just right around that timeline I was done with it. And then I transferred to another university that was a state school, and it was not religiously affiliated at all and significantly less expensive. So in a way, I relate to the data in this research because I guess I understand why they would choose college students being exposed to much more information that challenges their worldview. If the far right is concerned that college does, liberalize and trans your students, well, they might because they're going to be historically a safe place where ideas are challenged, new information is presented, you're required to cite your sources and fact find and get comfortable with the discomfort of putting effort into a project. And if you're lucky, enjoy the benefits of like working with a interdisciplinary team, like other students, to collaborate on a project over the course of a semester, things like that. And there's data, we've talked about it here before, there's other robust data that supports, working with an interdisciplinary team, data support that working with an interdisciplinary team or multidisciplinary team yields better outcomes in every known case. So that's like healthcare outcomes, having a diverse treatment team, involved in care planning, down to research data. The more diverse groups that participate in curating research data, of course, methodology matters too, but the more diverse groups associated with curating research data tend to yield more reliable, valid outcomes, better data, that kind of thing. So it all matters. I guess the point of even mentioning that is young minds going to college are going to be exposed to a diversity of opinions and information outside of systems of control that they may have otherwise been held to prior. Let's see. To measure the potential benefits of questioning faith, the team assessed participants on their quest orientation. Quest orientation is a psychological term for the mindset that views religion and spirituality as an ongoing, flexible search for truth, and I would say that's arguably healthy. That invites some sustainable humility with exploring something that you cannot materially provide evidence for, right? People with a high quest orientation embrace complexity and are willing to change their minds when presented with new evidence. When the team analyzed the data, the most highly endorsed reasons for doubting religion were primarily social rather than theological. Students ranked the hypocrisy of religious people and intolerance towards gay and lesbian individuals as their top two reasons for questioning faith. Did I not make good on the sip? I'll do it again. I thought I got gargled a little brown down my gullet. I need to, yeah. They're just hearing a little rattle in my voice. They're hearing that. I'm getting a little peapawed over here. And hey, let me tell you what's going on with these college students in research. They need more God, not less. Where's my Marlboros? I'm adequately hydrated, thank you. When the team analyzed the data, the most highly endorsed reasons for doubting religion were primarily social rather than theological. Okay, we read that. Scrolling down. While the problem of evil and unfair suffering was also a highly ranked reason for doubt, social grievances dominated the top of the list. The students were largely troubled by the negative behaviors of religious adherents rather than logical inconsistencies in sacred texts, of which there are an abundance. Even if you just bypass and stick to the New Testament. This suggests that interpersonal friction is a primary driver of religious disengagement among young adults. Different types of students did prioritize slightly different concerns. Highly religious students were more likely to report struggles with concepts like the afterlife or the conflict between evolutionary science and creationism. I've known plenty of people who reconcile all of that into one worldview and say it can all coexist. Still, across the board, the behavior of religious individuals proved to be a major stumbling block for the undergraduate population. As researchers anticipated, the presence of doubt was linked to negative mental health outcomes. Both general religious doubt and specific doubt struggles predicted greater emotional distress and lower overall well-being. Even when controlling for their overlapping similarities, both variables independently predicted negative mental health scores. These negative mental health outcomes were the most pronounced among students who were highly engaged with their religion. For highly religious students, having questions about their faith was tightly connected to inner turmoil and anxiety. Because their belief systems were central to their identity, cracks in that foundation caused intense worry. And I think rightfully so, because there is the notion of what we described, 5-10 minutes ago, about, if you're presented with information that contradicts your worldview and your foundation of beliefs and what you think you have evidence to support, and now you're being presented with a litany of well-sourced facts that challenge that, it literally activates your fight or flight system, and that self-soothing, self-protective mechanism comes up to result in the rather risky cognitive dissonance. That cognitive dissonance tries to protect you from reconciling and accommodating new information until you, hopefully, and I would say this for myself and anybody, remind yourself to stay curious. Curiosity is so often going to maintain connection with yourself and others. If you need a nice, punched up, alliterative thing for the day, adage, idiom, I need a nice and neat, tidy, punched up, alliterative idiom for the day. Curiosity is so often going to maintain your connection to yourself and others. Put that in your pocket for later. In contrast, non-religious students reported plenty of doubts, but did not experience the same level of emotional distress over them. I'm gonna wonder why that is. Where is the buffer that they have? Where's the cognitive buffer that they have made their peace with? Is there some existential satisfaction that they are soothed by, in the instance of not having whatever they would have otherwise resigned their existence to supernaturally? If they're without that, is that suddenly more of a comfort because then there's nothing else? There's no watchmaker behind the watch to then discount anymore. They've made their peace with a different foundation, different school of thought that supports our presence here, right? For students who had already left their faith, having many reasons for doubt simply validated their decision to exit the religion. The relationship between religious doubt and mental health challenges was also stronger at the Christian university compared to secular institutions, which is even more interesting. But again, this is just data tied to one study, so it's not every study, or this isn't a study that's comprehensive across every uni across America, right? Although mental health impacts seem discouraging, the data revealed a much brighter side to questioning one's faith. The data revealed a much brighter side to questioning one's faith. Students who reported higher levels of religious doubt also scored highly on measures of quest orientation. Remember, the quest orientation was associated with kind of a mindfulness strategy of humility and accepting that you are going to have cliff's edge of your knowledge and there's going to be an abundance of information you don't know, and so you are curious. That is healthy. They demonstrated a strong desire to search for meaning and a willingness to embrace nuanced worldviews. In addition, the doubting students exhibited greater intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is the recognition that one's own beliefs might be wrong. Combined with a willingness to listen to opposing viewpoints, students who identified as spiritual but not religious or who had disengaged from organized religion entirely showed elevated scores on these open-mindedness variables, excuse me. The research team determined that having doubts is not simply a mental health liability. Instead, experiencing religious uncertainty can serve as a catalyst for personal growth and deeper existential exploration. Wrestling with difficult questions often helps emerging adults become more flexible, compassionate, and resilient and develop resilient worldviews. I would say this applies to children or adults of all ages, but however you want to articulate that. There are some limitations to research that require consideration. The participants were mostly white, Christian, and cisgender women, which means the results might not perfectly reflect the attitudes of broader population. Well, we already know. I mean, there's other data that younger men are identifying with courtesy of Christian nationalism in many ways, and manosphere influencers bear some responsibility. There is a slight uptick in young men claiming to be religious, but when pressed, I would doubt they're not behaving very Christ-like. The specific survey used to measure reasons for doubt was originally created in 1997. Because of this, it did not include political factors that might cause religious disillusionment today. Issues like reproductive rights, climate change, and the merging of religion with partisan politics are likely major sources of modern skepticism. Future research could use open-ended questions to identify new reasons young people are stepping away from faith. Scientists might also incorporate updated tools to measure intellectual humility and spiritual yearning more precisely. For the last article, which I mentioned earlier, a psychological need for certainty is associated with radical right voting. They also psychologically tend to value authority and subservience. And to me, if I'm going to offer an opinion about it, spoon-fed truths, truths in quotes, because it takes less cognitive labor to be told what to believe, right? There's no discomfort felt. Making you do it again. I gotta take care of Professor Cable. Well, thank you. I will. I'll hit some real shit now, like some actual water. Can't do all that for free. Also, some of you may have not seen me in about a week and then taken a peek at your camera and going, hey, Cable, fuck's up with the shitty mustache? And I'm here to tell you. It's for a Mario cosplay tomorrow, mamas. I've been strategically shaving everything below the upper lip. And what I could do in about a week's time. You know. No testosterone deficiency here. I gritted really hard in front of the mirror. I prayed about it, and then I got my mustache. Woo! Interestingly, there may be a high likelihood that the revival among young men won't stick. I think so too, because the people that they value are going down and have gone down. I'm talking about like the Andrew Tates and the claviculars and whoever else said out there that just represents that sort of very narrow appeal. There's no real longevity to that appeal because of a lot of the shit that we talk about here. There's no real cognitive strategies for overcoming adversity with that because there's very limited, there's very self-isolating in-group type of parameters that are upheld that, I mean, simplistically don't sustain much. Sugar biscuits, sugar biscuits, thank you. Can I call you Sugar? Typically, I don't keep facial hair on just because I tend to pull it out. Is it trichotillomania? I'll let someone else be the judge. But yeah, it's just a sensory thing. I tend to keep it clean. I don't know, maybe once a year. Like I'll grow it out more fully, like towards the winter. But even then, it doesn't last. Also, welcome in. How'd you find the channel? And if you go by any other name other than the pseudonym I see in chat, let me know. It may take some doing, but I will try to pin that to my hippocampus and remember what to call you. All right, back on low cognitive labor. And let's talk shit about right-wingers and use data to do it. Because we no longer try to appeal to the other side. They've made their place. A new study published in the Journal of Personality and Individual Differences suggests that a person's ability to handle uncertain situations plays a role in their political choices. Which, again, remember, the mechanisms that come up with uncertainty are so often symptoms of anxiety that we would hope, based on social learning and having good teachers in one's life, that they are able to navigate to a good outcome. But, again, at the mercy of their peer group and influencers and often exploitative systems of power, especially power differentials around them that constantly want their attention. And ours. The research provides evidence that people who struggle with ambiguity tend to favor rigid ideologies. People who struggle with ambiguity, or let's just say nuance here, tend to favor rigid ideologies, which in turn increases their likelihood of supporting radical right political parties. These findings highlight how basic psychological responses to an increasingly complex world can shape broader political movements. Past research hints that broad personality traits influence voting behavior, but the exact pathway has remained somewhat unclear. To explore this dynamic, researchers focus on a psychological concept called tolerance for ambiguity. It's also worth bringing up, I mean, there's a lot of other studies on personality traits, personality types, suspected diagnoses of personality types, who vote one way or the other. And more often than not, without diagnoses, because you can't really do that when you're conducting a research study unless someone just volunteers that for you. But for what it's worth, as it relates to this, like current data supports, and it's been reinforced plenty, that persons more susceptible to persuasion, more likely to have paranoid ideological cognition, and Machiavellian, and either embrace Machiavellianism or appreciate Machiavellianism in like a social political management schema, they tend to vote right wing. And so when I say Machiavellianism, I mean like they prefer systems of control and kind of one directional government and what you would probably consider like totalitarianism in a way. I was looking for trivia and this popped up. You popped up and call me Sugar. SB Biscuit or Sugar Biscuits, whatever you fancy. So typically I play a lot of retro games here. We fundraise a lot throughout the year, but I've worked in mental health for over a decade, and it's probably closer to 12 years at this point. And part of my job outside of this permits me to educate at times different groups, and I enjoy doing that here. Brief sachet aside, I'm a big advocate for shit talking our current needlessly complex healthcare system and what I can do to reduce friction in our healthcare system, especially when it comes to navigating an also needlessly complex mental healthcare system. So a lot of what I do here is try to debunk or eradicate certain stigmas and use data to do that. And that's outside of my own personal experience. I've worked at every level of care, so that's traditional outpatient crisis services to inpatient psychiatry to the group I work with currently provides mental health services to nursing homes. So like all ages, substance use or otherwise. It kind of puts me in a position of being sort of like a mental health generalist. I don't claim to know everything, but in so many cases I can at least connect the dots for someone. Which if I were in anyone else's shoes, not having worked in this career, I would appreciate finding. So I just try to give that out, usually in like the first hour of every stream, and then after we take a break, we'll come back and play whatever game I have on deck. So lately it's been Puppeteer on the PS3. That's probably the worst I've ever described what happens here. I'm usually much more fucking charismatic than that. It's been a weird few days. It's raining oil on Tehran right now. It's been a weird fucking few days. But thank you for asking. We're happy to have you. I'm glad you found the channel. It's usually like through someone else's channel they find their way here versus just like navigating around. That's the first in a while. Do you also stream? We usually ask that question too. We've got a lot of other content creators here. I say that and immediately like feel like bile in the back of my throat. Content. But people who make YouTube essays or stream on Twitch or otherwise, you know, if you do, that's fine to talk about. I'd love to know more about you. Past research hints that broad personality traits influence voting behavior, but the exact pathway has remained somewhat unclear. To explore this dynamic, the researchers focused on a psychological concept called tolerance for ambiguity. Tolerance for ambiguity refers to how well a person can process complex, contradicting, or unfamiliar information without feeling threatened. We may be using this term more often now. I mean, more often than not, I just say managing uncertainty. And how we manage the physical symptoms of anxiety that come up with that, how we navigate that. A little cognitive labor, a little preparation can go a long way to long-term soothing there too. Tolerance for ambiguity refers to how well a person can process complex, contradicting, or unfamiliar information without feeling threatened. People with a high tolerance for ambiguity generally accept that the world is messy and complicated. Well, very Gestalt. Those with a low tolerance for ambiguity tend to prefer black and white, more rigid, like dichotomous type thinking that we were talking about earlier, seeking out clear rules and simple answers. The scientists, I would say that those among us who appreciate the shades of gray and nuance also still prefer clear rules and simple answers. Just we also like to get more than fluff about it, you know? We're less accepting of face value shit. The scientists proposed this specific psychological trait as a bridge between foundational personality traits and political ideology. It looks like we're out of snoozes and we have ads in about 8 minutes, so I'm going to try to scoot through this and then we'll take a break and come back with video games. Yay! The study was inspired by both a theoretical gap and real-world developments. While previous research suggested that personality traits are indirectly related to support for radical right parties, the psychological mechanism behind this link has remained unclear. We aim to address this by proposing tolerance for ambiguity as a mediating factor. At the same time, the rise of radical right parties, such as the Alternative for Germany, highlights the societal importance of understanding how people cope with uncertainty in complex social and political contexts. They base their work on psychological entropy theory. This scientific theory suggests that human personality is deeply shaped by how individuals manage uncertainty and the anxiety it brings. We've said that a few times tonight. According to this framework, an unpredictable world creates a sense of psychological disorder. People are motivated to reduce this disorder to feel secure. What a silly song to have up. I'm keeping it. The researchers hypothesize that individuals who are less tolerant of ambiguity develop a strong need for certainty. So what are you hearing there? What are you hearing there? The researchers hypothesize that individuals who are less tolerant of ambiguity, so less tolerant of the physical symptoms or cognitive pangs of dealing with uncertainty, develop a need for certainty because why? It's self-soothing. It's fast-acting. It's less laborious. Doesn't mean they're wrong or need to be shamed for that, but room for growth, I think it's fair to say. The desire for clarity might make right-wing authoritarianism, anti-immigrant sentiments, and populist attitudes highly appealing to them. We can shame them for that. I say that with some caution. A brain in shame, just another idiom to take away for the evening, a brain in shame does not positively learn the thing. Shame is activating, again, for fight or flight. It creates distance versus connection. You want someone to be curious about what you're talking about, but there is such a thing as appropriate shame. Like if you have done wrong or hold dearly worldviews that oppress others, yeah, I think you deserve to be made to feel shamed about that. There is such a thing as healthy shame. And then the guilt that they might feel from that also would be appropriate, right? Right-wing authoritarianism, as opposed to what? Like the hackneyed dumb bullshit that you would see in like a comment section from somebody on the right who would say something like, pronouns in bio. And then they're gonna go buy like a fucking Trump Xbox when it's released. Those types, you know? Right-wing authoritarianism is an ideological stance characterized by strict obedience to traditional authorities, aggressive feelings towards those who break social norms, and a strong preference for conventional morals. Populist attitudes involve a specific worldview that favors popular sovereignty and sees society as divided into two working groups. These populist groups are typically viewed as pure, homogeneous, so same, ordinary people and a corrupt elite class. Anti-immigrant sentiment provides a simplified way to view marginalized groups as a source of societal problems. And what you're hearing there is they're presented a case of talking about an entire group of people without nuance, right? Like demonize them for, this is usually the right-wing talking point, demonize them for the low-hanging, lazy intellectual fruit of they're taking our jobs and our housing and blah, blah, blah. And what do they contribute? Well, they contribute literally trillions to the economy. And most of them did follow the actual required processes of coming here legally. There were just some hiccups along the way. There's a significant minority of illegal immigrants who have committed any crime beyond the misdemeanor of being an immigrant. So that type of like nuanced information doesn't usually get communicated to them because it wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been effective for like a Fox News broadcaster to include that in the rampant, wanton, emotionally heavily led demonization of that group that supports a certain narrative, right? That's how they manufacture consent. You manufacture consent in that propaganda type media without including nuance. You don't offer that both sides. And so the appeal for that type of personality who is not accustomed to facing the discomfort of uncertainty or ambiguity are going to be rapidly soothed by that. It actually, it affects, like, say, the boomer generation and older worse because almost 40% of them are going to be struggling with, say, neurocognitive decline. They're going to have less access to their prefrontal network. And just generationally speaking, they're going to be more aligned to that type of news, unfortunately. Harder group to work with, but an easy case for, again, like a Fox News type broadcaster to count as their demographic. Let's see. Ultimately, they sought to determine if these views drive votes for the Alternative for Germany, a prominent radical right party. To test these ideas, the scientists used data from an online panel survey conducted in Germany between 2020 and 2021. The sample consisted of 1,635 adults ranging from 18 to 74. Yeah, I'll go ahead and hit the other snooze. Thank you, Tel. The group was selected using mathematical quotas based on age, gender, and geographic region to approximate the general German population. The researchers also intentionally included a high percentage of people with a migration background to ensure diverse perspectives. Participants then completed several standardized psychological questionnaires. First, They answered questions designed to measure the fundamental Big Five personality traits. These traits include openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Next, the survey assessed the participants' tolerance for ambiguity by asking how they felt about unfamiliar situations and challenging perspectives. And honestly, like managing uncertainty, the discomfort of uncertainty, like benefits us all. That's all something we can work on. The researchers also measured the participants' individual levels of right-wing authoritarianism, populist attitudes, and anti-immigrant sentiment. Finally, the participants rated how likely they were to vote for the alternative for Germany on a mathematical scale. This scale ranged from 0, meaning very unlikely, to 10, meaning very likely. The scientists used statistical models to analyze the relationships between those very different survey responses. They found that a lower tolerance for ambiguity is strongly associated with higher levels of right-wing authoritarianism. People who struggled with uncertainty were also noticeably more likely to express populist attitudes and negative feelings towards immigrants. We were particularly surprised by the comparatively strong association between low tolerance for ambiguity and right-wing authoritarianism compared to the more moderate associations with populist attitudes and anti-immigrant sentiment. This suggests that right-wing authoritarianism may be especially closely linked to epistemistic motivations related to uncertainty reduction. That did not say epistemistic, it's epistemic, but even so, epistemology, like the study of knowledge, like how do they know what they know. These rigid ideological views were linked to voting preferences. Stronger right-wing authoritarianism, populist attitudes, and anti-immigrant sentiments all predicted a higher likelihood of voting for the alternative for Germany. Populist attitudes showed an especially strong connection to supporting the radical right. Scientists also examined how foundational personality traits fit into this picture. They found that people who scored higher to openness to experience and extroversion tended to have a higher tolerance for ambiguity. Surprise! But not really. People who scored higher in neuroticism, which involves a tendency to express anxiety, showed a lower tolerance for ambiguity. So we talked about like distress tolerance quite a bit here, but like the window of tolerance overall, like reference that if you need to. These personality associations align with the idea that outgoing and open individuals actively explore unknown situations. This exploration may help build their tolerance to complexity over time. However, the researchers noted that the effect sizes connecting basic personality traits to ambiguity tolerance were quite small. Mad routine mentioned? Let's see. I'm stuck in the late 90s to early 2000s. Oh, we're gonna get along fine. Punk rock, alt ska, grunge. I do sprinkle in some metal here and there. I'm all about it. I think I'm a very late. I don't know if they're considered metal, but I think I'm a very late adopter of like Deftones. They were on my playlist at the gym earlier, and I'm kind of like, why did I pass on these guys when I was in high school? I was listening to heavier shit. I say that. I was into more like punk at the time, but all the same. I passed on them, I'm catching up now. But in any case, based on what you're describing, yeah, one of the communities we hang out in is Vila's, and then Vila's in a band with another fella from Texas, My City Glory. Together, they are Mad Routine, and they make like a trip-hop grunge. You gotta experience it. We can shout out Vila, and then Sugar might find their way over there. I'm gonna merge communities here. Drum and bass and house. I love dance music too. Thanks to mi madre. And a few Latin artists as well. Very cool. I don't fuck with Spotify anymore, but I am curious. Any other artists that you like to share? How we doing on time? We got 7 minutes? Okay, I think I can finish this in 7 minutes. There ain't 7 minutes article left. This study suggests that while personality plays a role, it does not dictate a person's ability to handle uncertainty on its own. Right, there's a multitude of factors. We are a constellation. The poetry of being human, we are a constellation. The most robust finding remains the strong link between the low ambiguity tolerance and the adoption of rigid political ideologies. So in summary, for a lot of this data, it's not metadata, It's just data based on a questionnaire, but the data from this study indicates that those with a lower tolerance for stress in general are more likely to support right-wing ideologies. That's what we're getting out of that. Conversely, those who are a little more prefrontal and able to sit with some discomfort of uncertainty and managing their anxieties, those who are a little more pro-socially aligned tend to vote the opposite direction. And we support them. Wherever they are on their quest, to reference the other article, wherever they are on their quest, we support them. Study relies on observational data, meaning it does not provide a direct cause and effect relationship. As always, correlation is not causal. Gotta recognize that. It is entirely possible that holding rigid political ideologies also reduces a person's tolerance for ambiguity over time. Right. Additionally, having a low tolerance for ambiguity is a perfectly normal psychological disposition. Right? None of us want to be made to feel uncomfortable. And the natural inclination, neurologically speaking, when our central nervous system is involved, is to protect, is to soothe, is to get us back to homeostasis after threat detection as soon as possible. But threat detection and then, of course, discomfort avoidance, a lot of avoidant mechanisms get reinforced throughout our everyday. So it is fair to say that, naturally we would have kind of a lower tolerance for ambiguity, that we'd want to work on that muscle, basically. Work on that cognitive muscle so you can flex it later when you need to. There are more. I will share all of these articles in the Discord, so you may sip on them later. And of course, I'll drop them all here, in case you would like them now. And soon here, we're gonna take a break. It's streamer tinkle time. I gotta make yellow. Too much brown, I gotta make yellow. Mad routine, Nandu. Oh, you would dig them very much. Also on Bandcamp, yeah, big fans of Bandcamp, and I think, did I miss it? I don't know if it's either last Friday or this coming Friday is like the first Bandcamp Friday of the year. I was get to Spotify by my sister from another mister, so when it expired back to YouTube and Pandora's, oh, I got you. I'm not shaming anybody for using Spotify, but we all know data hoarding is bad in most cases, and it's hard to find really any operator who isn't collecting more from us than they really need, much less those who pay the artists what they fucking deserve. But yeah, to that end, big fans of Bandcamp. But yeah, you can find their music on Spotify or wherever you get your music. They've got some really cool music videos shot on like high 8. So you've got that authentic late 90s, early 2000s feel, like that aesthetic is represented in their music videos. Because they're recording on digital videotape and then importing everything over minute by minute. Editing them all themselves. Actually just got a cassette from them. Their latest... Maybe I can play their music on the break. I haven't opened the cassette yet. Maybe I'll do that when we get back. But this just arrived. And it's green. I'm a little apprehensive to open it, but I will. I mean, I gotta, because we were told there's like a little surprise with the album art inside. But that's the new album. That's what you want to look for. I mean, there's no wrong choice in finding their music, but... Mad routine for BRB? We can do that, Heather. You've cashed in your dilly bars. We can do that. So yeah, what's on the docket for when I come back? We're gonna play this. We started this a couple streams ago. We're gonna continue this. It's one of my all-time faves on the PS3. It still goes for quite a nasty high price. And the more I promote this, the more I find people aren't familiar with it at all, so I'm happy to show it off. Nice little dose of therapeutic escapism, plus it's cute as shit. The art design is amazing. Alright, y'all. First break of the evening. This is when I implore you, scan your body meats from your toes to your tingles and identify. It's like Mr. Rogers taking off his jacket and putting on the cardigan. Scan your body meats from your toes to your tingles and identify any sensory needs that you have to meet. Be that movement, temperature change, food or drink. If I may remain... Thank you for the biddy. If I may remain on your dopamine menu for the evening, thank you. When we come back, it's retro time, mamas. Mad routine on the break because Heather asked very nicely for it. I will see you in a minute.